morning, guys. How are you? We're going to be starting a brand new book today, and it's called Benjamin West and His Cat, Grimalkin. And as usual, all I want you to do is just sit, listen to the reading. If you're having a hard time hearing me, I want you to put some headphones on so you can just really get into the story. Okay? So here we go. This is chapter 1 of Benjamin West and His Cat, Grimalkin. Chapter 1, welcome to the Door Latch Inn. Benjamin woke with a jerk. He held his breath, trying to separate the sounds that came floating up from the inn yard. Usually he slept through noises, and travelers could lift the latch, help themselves to the snack of food set out for them, warm themselves by the fire, and leave it without his so much as hearing them. But tonight, there was a small sound that he could not make out. In a moment, everything went quiet. Papa's hound dogs stopped yapping. The rumble of cartwheels died. It was like the stillness that often comes in the middle of a storm. Benjamin raised himself up on one elbow, and he wished he had ears like a horse so that he could swivel them around to catch the tiniest sounds. There, the little noise came again. It was not the trembling cry of a screech owl. It was not the creaking of the inn signboard or the frightening howl of a wolf. It sounded more like a boy. In a flash, Benjamin's bare feet were on the stool that acted as a mounting block for his high bed. Soundlessly, he dropped to the floor and hurried over to the tiny square window. He threw open the shutters and he poked his head out into the frosty November night. The courtyard spread out below him was washed in moonlight. He could see a man leading 2 scrawny oxen to the shed. He could make out the figures of a woman and a boy on the seat of the ox cart. Suddenly, the boy bent over something in his lap and let out a dry sob. Benjamin tore off his nightshirt. His clothes laid heaped on a bench in a white patch of moonlight. Quickly, he slipped into his leather jerkin and knee breeches. How cold they felt. Perhaps the boy was crying because he was cold. But no, figured Benjamin, as he pulled on his hand-knit stockings and hobnail shoes. It took more than cold to make a boy cry like that. Shivering, he lifted the latch and tiptoed out into the hall. Papa cried as he collided with Mr. West, who was walking briskly toward him with a candle in his hand. Benjamin tried to straighten the candle, which he had tipped at a crazy angle. He dabbed at it, at the hot tallow which had spilled down Mr. West's coat. Then he looked up at his father, and frightened as he was, he wanted to laugh. In the long shadows made by the candle, his father looked exactly like the scarecrow in Mama's kitchen garden. The scarecrow wore a sober Quaker jacket and a white nightcap to frighten the crows. And here was Mr. West dressed like a sober Quaker he was, except for the white nightcap perched on his head. But even with his nightcap on, Papa looked forbidding. "Benjamin," he said, his eyebrows scowling, "must you meet every guest?" "No, Papa," replied Benjamin earnestly, but there is a boy crying, a grown boy of 7 or 8 like me." Well, Papa pulled off his nightcap and tucked it in his pocket. Come along then, he said. Step sprightly, I may need you. Well, Benjamin followed the black coattails of his father as they flapped down the narrow, winding stairway. At the foot of the stairs, Mr. West lighted the lantern that hung on an iron hook. Then he pinched out his candle and set it on the candle shelf. Benjamin cast a quick glance around the kitchen. 2 Indians lay wrapped in blankets on the floor, their feet to the fire. They grunted in their sleep, then drew their heads into the blankets, like turtles drawing into their shells. Benjamin and his father signaled out their own black hats from the long row that hung on pegs near the door. Then they went out into the night. In the bright moonlight, they saw the boy seated on the upping block used in mounting horses. His parents hovered over him like anxious birds. Welcome to Doorlatch Inn in the country of Chester, in the province of Pennsylvania, spoke Papa in a voice so big it rattled the windows. The little family started at the sound. I am John West, the innkeeper, Papa said as he held the lanthorn high. And this is my youngest son. His name is Benjamin. So, said the stranger, shaking hands stiffly, and I am Johann Ditzler. By me is my wife and my little feller, Jacob. We come over the seas from the Rhineland. By morning early, we make the journey west over the mountains. We find good land. Papa nodded. Then he pointed to the boy who sat on the upping block, rocking back and forth, holding something tightly in his arms. What, asked Papa, is wrong with that boy? Replied Mr. Ditzler, such troubles we got. Jacob here, he got a sick kitten. We want he should leave it go, but he cries his eyes out. Yeah, spoke up Mr. Ditzler. By Philadelphia, it makes down rain. Our big cat and her kitten got all spritzed. Our big cat, she dies on us. Soon now we lose her kitten. And Jacob is crying. Just listen. Such a big boy he is too. Jacob turned to Benjamin for help. And in an instant, Benjamin was on his knees, peering into Jacob's arms, and there, lying limp and motionless, was a tiny black kitten. Benjamin listened to its harsh breathing, and then he felt the kitten's nose, as hot as an ember. He said to Jacob. Benjamin longed to tug at his father's coattails. What kind of way was this to save a kitten that was sick? Why did grown-ups waste so much time in talking? Animals, Papa was saying, as his breath made little white clouds of steam, they are creatures of God. They need protection in suffering. Well, the German parents were too tired and cold to do any more talking. All they wanted was a place to lay their heads for the night. Well, Benjamin could stand the delay no longer. Please, Papa, he whispered. Elmira, the barn cat, has kittens, 6 of them. He spoke quickly now for fear Papa would not listen to his plan. She will scarce notice one more. Well, Papa blinked up at the moon. He frowned. For a long moment, he stroked his chin. At last, he handed Benjamin the lantern. Well, you may try, he said. Dr. Morris says a mother cat will often adopt... I think what I meant to say was that Dr. Morris says a mother cat will often adopt a hungry kitten, but warm a jug of milk first. Or maybe the kitten will not feed or need a foster mother. Well, Benjamin's heart started to leap. He got so excited. He suddenly felt as important as Dr. Morris. He could almost feel Dr. Morris' big red bush wig upon his head, but he was glad he was still a boy and he could run. He ran now across the courtyard and the barnyard, around the worn path to the cellar. He lifted the heavy trapdoor and clattered down the cobblestone steps, his lantern making long shadows on the wall. He made his way past barrels of sweet-smelling apples without even stopping to fill his pockets. The milk crock was full. The good yellow cream had risen to the top. Carefully he ladled it into a tiny jug, and then he hurried into the kitchen, and it was bright with firelight now, and a kettle was singing over the fire. Mama was up pouring hot water into the teapot and spreading bread with brown rice, apple butter, saying a quiet word to comfort the little German family who sat in a row on the hooded settle. So boys and girls, so far we see that there is a little boy who has a problem. He has a kitten that is dying, and he wants to save this kitten. He wants to protect this kitten. And so they came up with a plan for that to happen. Well, Benjamin glanced at the kitten, and it was still breathing. He placed the jug of cream in a little nook in the chimney. "It will soon be warm," he said to Jacob, a little smile of encouragement. And then he took the rush basket used for gathering eggs, and in no time it was in the barn, reaching into the hay mow for Elmira and one of her kittens. Elmira shrugged, but Benjamin held her and her kitten firmly in the basket. All the while he talked in a soft voice. "I'll bring back the rest of the family soon," he promised. And then he hurried back to the inn, balancing the basket as carefully as if he held new laid eggs. "You see," whispered Benjamin to Jacob as he stroked the big mother cat, "this is Elmira. She will mother your kitten too. Please put it in the basket." Well, gently the boy laid his kitten alongside Elmira's kitten, and then Benjamin, he set the basket on the floor close to the warm fire. The room turned very quiet. All eyes were on the basket. Not a word was said, only the fire whistled up the chimney and the Indians grunted in their sleep. For 2 or 3 seconds, the barn cat he stared at the strange kitten. Then she sniffed it curiously. Her nose wrinkled. The fur flew up on her back. Her tail got stiff. She spat at him. Suddenly, she turned on her own kitten and began washing her face. Benjamin said a quick prayer under his breath. "Please, God, make Elmira be a mother to this sick kitten." Then, in case his prayer might not have been answered at once, he tiptoed around the chimney and reached for the jug of cream. "Benjamin," commanded Mr. West, "take Elmira back to the barn. Thy plan will not work." Well, Benjamin was so startled at hearing his father's voice that he upset the jug. "Oh!" cried Benjamin. An ache echoed Jacob as the cream spilled over into the basket right on top of his kitten. Now it so happened that Elmira had been raised on skim milk, and when she saw the thick yellow cream dripping into the basket, she began licking it from the black kitten's coat. Up and down went Elmira's head as her pink tongue licked every bit of the rich cream from the kitten's back. And then the strangest thing happened. When all the cream was gone, she kept right on licking. She kept right on stroking the sick kitten with her rough, warm tongue. Benjamin glanced sidelong at the boy. He laughed out loud for joy. Papa clicked his tongue in amazement. The kitten was stirring ever so slightly. He was stretching. He was letting out a hungry mewing sound. Oh, breathed Benjamin. Ah, sighed Jacob. Now Elmira was lying on her side, nosing the black kitten and wriggling up to him. After what seemed a long time, but actually was only a matter of seconds, the black kitten began to nuzzle along the barn's cat's belly, and at last he and the white kitten were nursing side by side. A good feeling came over the whole room. Elmira purred until she sounded like a spinning wheel. Then she looked up at the anxious watchers with a pleased smirk on her face. Everything gets all right, choked Mr. Disler as he patted Jacob on the head. Even Papa seemed happy. He blew his nose as loud as a trumpet. Well, that ends chapter 1 of our reading of Benjamin West and his cat, Gromolkin. So a couple of things that we saw in this chapter was the fact that this little boy was crying because he wanted to take care of this kitten. And he wanted to make sure that this kitten got well. And his parents really didn't want him to have the kitten, but anyway, he kept the kitten and everything ended up turning out just fine in our story. And so I'll be back a little bit later to read to you chapter 2 of our story of Benjamin West. I'll see you in a bit.